We got a real decent slate of college football on deck for week 4 coming up on the Michael Welch podcast.
All my blessings, 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 all my blessings.
I need my blessings every penny, daily counting every single one I'm seeing plenty.
So reflecting briefly on last week, the weekday games, Thursday, Friday, we saw South Alabama, after starting the season 0-2, put up another big score, 48-14 on Appalachian State, as they were the underdog on the road there. But back-to-back weeks, they've blown the hell out of their opposition. 120-something points the past 2 weeks, as they put up 87 on Northwestern State in a shortened game, and then 48 on App State. They may finally have something really rolling there, at least on the offensive side of the football, especially in the ground game. That's where they excel. Fluff Bothwell, the top running back there, averaging almost 10 yards per carry on 37 totes and 6 touchdowns to lead the backfield there. Gio Lopez, the quarterback, able to get out and move around a bit as well. The defensive end seems to be coming around a little bit too, but just an outstanding offensive performance the past couple weeks by South Alabama. We had 3 underdog covers on Friday night. 2 games went to overtime, 2 upsets, and a double overtime scare as well. Number 24, according to the AP poll at the time, Illinois goes on the road to beat number 22, Nebraska, 31-24, 4 touchdowns for Luke Altmaier on the road in an overtime win. We were able to see the Illini get a touchdown and then hold the Cornhuskers off the board. Raiola played just fine, 24 for 35, 297 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick. They're not able to get anything going on the road, but he is challenged there by that Illini defense and excels quite fine. It's just the ground game is non-existent for this team. He has a couple fumbles in this game, but he is able to scoop those puppies back up, and they're just not able to ultimately come away here from a win. He's sacked 5 times, 7 tackles for loss as well, as the Illini get after the Huskers a bit there. Not as potent a ground game, I would say, from Illinois either. They do brush for over 150 yards altogether. They break a couple of bigger runs out here, but really it's just a better defensive performance. I mean, overall, 7 for 13 for Illinois on third down, 8 for 15 for Nebraska. Illinois does come out ahead in yardage. They come out ahead in penalties. 3 for them, 10 for Nebraska. And it was just a great back and forth ball game for the Illini. And they may be legitimate here in the, I guess, upper middle layer of the Big Ten, but we'll see moving forward and discuss that in a moment. Stanford did indeed go on the road and beat Syracuse in the Carrier Dome, something that's not easily accomplished. 26-24 was the final there. They were able to knock a field goal in the last few seconds. Ashton Daniels, 23 for 38, 178, a touchdown and 2 picks. He also had 45 yards on the ground. Not a great day throwing the football for him, but again, he can make a couple plays when need be. McCord had 2 touchdowns, 2 picks, 339 yards, 27 for 48 passing, nothing on the ground going for the Orangemen. But man, Stanford, just something about Stanford. As I've noted numerous times, they were able to get after Syracuse a decent amount. 4 sacks, 7 tackles for losses. So just keep that in mind as we touch on Stanford moving forward. And we also had, those are both upsets, but we also had Washington State having to survive a double overtime scare against San Jose State, who had an opportunity to complete a 2-point play to push it to double overtime. And it's just one of those where everything just goes wrong. They lose the ball. Just a disaster as the quarterback is scrambling and towards the end of this one. But the final is 54-52. I believe it's tied at halftime. Washington State's up by a touchdown at halftime. San Jose State comes out for 21-0 third quarter, while Washington State turns around on a 22-8 fourth quarter, and just trading blows back and forth in this game. Emmett Brown put the ball in the air 54 times, had 4 touchdowns and 375 yards for San Jose State. And John Mater had 46 attempts for 390 yards, 4 touchdowns as well. He also ran for 111 yards and a touchdown as the quarterback for the Cougars. And just a lot of action in this ball game. And Washington State managed to come out 4-0, one of the underrated, undefeated teams here, along with a few shockers, I would say. Duke's 4-0, Indiana's 4-0, Pitt's 0-0, 4-0. They put up 73 points against Youngstown State. Army, Navy, and Rutgers are all 3-0 teams and undefeated as well, obviously. Getting back on track with some of the heavier hitting games, we did have Tennessee beating Oklahoma in probably the top game on the docket. This game was interesting, I would say. There were points where it was a little bit sluggish, and there were points where it was really kind of slushy. There were some big plays still. Tennessee, it was 19-3 at the half, and the final score was 25-15. Oklahoma did score some late, but this was kind of a sloppy game. 1 touchdown, 194 yards, 13 for 21 passing for Nico there in Tennessee. They did a lot more damage on the ground. Dylan Sampson had the big touchdown rush, 16 yards out, just under 100 yards rushing for him. On the other side, the offense for Oklahoma, they ended up benching Jackson Arnold, who had a couple fumbles, 7 for 16 passing for 50-something odd yards, had real problems getting the offense, took a few sacks, and Michael Hawkins Jr. came out, 11 for 18, 132 yards and a touchdown, and he'll be the starter moving into this week as far as it's been declared so far. He is a redshirt freshman, and it'll be interesting. I believe he's a true freshman, actually. I take that back. It'll be interesting to see what Oklahoma was able to do offensively moving forward. Of course, all the remarks coming out about how the Sooners finally have something on defense under Brent Venables here, an elite defense, a secondary that's really challenging, as was expected coming into the season, and all of a sudden they can't do anything offensively, which is really, really too bad. Nico, as stated, only 21 pass attempts, 13 for 21. Ground game got going a little bit here. We did have 5 total turnovers, 2 by Tennessee, 3 by Oklahoma. What's that? 10 Tennessee penalties. They were 6 for 19 on third down, 2.9 yards rushing. Honestly, if this is one of the worst games Tennessee plays this year, or the worst, then they will be in the playoffs. They still played phenomenally for a team that was playing what might be a top 10, top 5 defense overall as we play throughout the rest of the year. That's very much what Oklahoma is exuding right now. But man, they are just not super great offensively. Really, really struggling. And again, it was one big pass play that Nico had here. A couple other, key play standouts, but again, there was a lot of soup, it felt like, in this game as well. Just a struggle. The offense for Oklahoma and Tennessee really did good defensively as well. Oklahoma had 5.5 yards per pass attempt, 1.1 per rush yard. And Tennessee got after them. Again, forced 3 turnovers and just did an excellent job of shutting them down. 3 for 15 on third down. 345 yards of offense to 222. So if they clean up some penalties, again, Nico's first challenge on the road against a good team, if this is Tennessee's worst game of the year, we're really going to see some interesting battles coming up here on their schedule. And Oklahoma's got to figure out something on offense. But that, even with a 10-point, final score there, Tennessee really had this all the way through. Now, Missouri wasn't out. Double overtime, 30-27. Man, Vanderbilt's kicker just shanked absolutely a devastating field goal attempt, trying to put this into triple overtime. basically one of those sudden death back and forth plays as we get that far, where they run one play from the 2-yard line and go back and forth until someone wins it, starting in triple overtime. But we didn't quite make it that far, unfortunately. So 30-27 is the final. Brady Cook does not look as good this year at quarterback for the Missouri Tigers. 226 yards, 2 touchdowns, 23 for 37 passing the football. Luther Burden had a couple big touchdowns in this one. 6 grabs overall for 76 yards. But again, just not as efficient this year on either side of the football. Diego Pavla is one of the top quarterbacks. I don't want to say top quarterbacks in the country. He's posting some pretty good numbers. He's 14 for 23, 178 and 2 touchdowns in this one. He's also the leading rusher, 80-something yards after sack yardage is removed. He had a big 30-something yard scamper in this one as well. And Vanderbilt looks like a team that is really, it's hard to say this right, building in the right direction and is going to be feisty moving forward. You have to remember they beat Florida and Kentucky last season. They just look like a feisty team. Feisty team moving forward. Of course, with the upper half of the SEC looking so good. Tennessee, essentially so good. So much better than the bottom half. Looks like there's a clear divide here. Tennessee, Georgia, Alabama, Ole Miss, Texas, and then a gap, and then maybe you can put your, I guess we do have a middle, right? It'd be Missouri, maybe LSU. I suppose you could put Texas A&M in there right now. Maybe Oklahoma, and maybe Vanderbilt. In the bottom, Mississippi State, Kentucky, Auburn, South Carolina, although they're 3-1 now, Arkansas. I don't know, it's a little muddled, but there's no reason that Vanderbilt can't be somewhere in the middle of the SEC when all's said and done. They look like a team that can do some damage. 3 sacks, 8 tackles for losses. Missouri struggled through most of this game. They trailed for a good chunk. 6.1 yards per pass attempt, 5.4 yards per rush. Clean game with no turnovers. Missouri had a lot more yardage and was 7 for 17 on third down, while the Commodores were 4 for 14. So the numbers are going to come out looking better in that regard. But still, Vanderbilt's really looking a lot better. Now they do play Alabama in a couple weeks. Then they play at Kentucky. They'll get Ball State. Then they'll get Texas before playing at Auburn, home against South Carolina, at LSU, and home against Texas. But you have to think there's a shot. They'll have a couple more shots at wins this year. But maybe not quite a bowl game, but maybe getting darn close there as well. Number 23, Northern Illinois, falls to Buffalo. So they could be out of the playoff race already. Terribly unfortunate there. Staying in the MAC, Bowling Green plays another top 25 team close. They're in a battle. They lead Texas A&M for a while. I didn't get a good look at this game. This was, ESPN Plus? So pretty much no one in the country was doing anything with box score watching this game. And yet Texas A&M struggled. They had a new quarterback under center, Marcel Reed. 173 yards, 2 touchdowns, 16 for 19 passing. Also a dozen scrambles, 90 yards, and was very proficient. He'll be starting this week as it's already been declared. Connor Balzac, I believe it's pronounced, something close to that, at starting quarterback for Bowling Green. 20 for 36, 250, a touchdown, and an interception. But more importantly, they were 6.8 yards per pass, while Texas A&M was 6 yards per pass. Texas A&M did have 5.5 yards per carry, while Bowling Green was 3.4, but that's still decently efficient. They had 339 yards of offense to Texas A&M's 408. They were only 25% on third down. That's not very good, but held A&M to 6 for 15, a turnover apiece, and only 10 penalties between the two teams. And they stayed very much in this game up until the end. Now, if you remember, they played Penn State real close, within a touchdown last time out. The final there was 34-27. This one was 26-20. Their only win was over Fordham so far, 41-17. Just a very good Falcons team that stays in ball games here and plays a little defense and plays a little offense. Be interesting to see what happens going through the MAC conference here, as again, Northern Illinois is in the mix. I think Toledo is still in the mix here. They're 3-1 so far this season. Eastern Michigan has an opportunity to move to 4-1. Buffalo is in the mix. So as we start to, it'll be several weeks before we get MAC weekday games, but the MAC will be an interesting conference to keep an eye on. That, at least from just a football fan perspective, just watching some of these conference games moving forward, they'll be very entertaining. Michigan wins late over USC. I suppose they've waited a little too long to get to that game. 27-24. They were ranked 18th and 11th at the time. Michigan underdogs at home here for the first time in many, many seasons. And it took a last-second drive and goal line push in the final minute in order to win over the Trojans. A game where they did not look very good. But, of course, they switched to Orji. They didn't allow him to pass the football. 7 for 12 for 32 yards. 46 carries, I believe, was the final tally. Mullings looks like the next great running back there. 17 for 159 and 2 touchdowns. Edwards had 14 for 74 and 1 touchdown. Still has that pop. But, man, it looks like he's already going to be the number 2 in the backfield to Mullings. And it's just going to be Michigan and that great defense clamping down on USC. Another great pick 6 in this game on Miller Moss, who finished 28 for 51, 283, 3 touchdowns and a pick, just like they had in game 1 against Utah. Reading the quick toss into the flats and just grabbing it and running it back to the end zone. Just a great play by Michigan. I would imagine you're not going to see a ton of those plays against them moving forward this season. Zachariah Branch, 6 catches for 98 yards for the USC Trojans. Again, highly touted freshman last season. And just a speedster, you'd like to see him get the ball a little bit more, I would think. But USC really struggling here on the road, big environment. They were 7 for 19 on third down. They had more yards than Michigan, 379 to 322. A couple turnovers both ways, but they only averaged 5.4 yards per pass. 4.6 per rush, though, that is worth noting. Michigan 6.3 per carry, 2.7 per pass attempt. They were 4 for 15 on third down, but broke a couple 40-plus yard runs. At least one was 40 yards. 41 yards was the long one. 63 was the other one by Mullings to go up early in this one, and we're just able to stick around and put a score on the board late there. So Michigan pulling away there from USC late in that one, the game of the week. Utah beat Oklahoma State on the road with no Cam Rising. 22-19, they were ranked 12th and 14th. I believe Oklahoma State was the favorite going into this one. But again, they are struggling right now. Alan Bowman had a not very good game. Pretty middling. 16 for 33, 206, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks. That's what we call a not great game. 50%, 200 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 turnovers. Split stats down the middle, and that equals a not very good ball game when nothing else comes together. Ollie Gordon, 11 carries, 42 yards. Not good. Not good at all. The defense had 10 tackles for loss and forced a couple turnovers out of Isaac Wilson. The reserve quarterback, as the other 2 fellows that was there last season, transferred out of Utah. Forced Utah into 5 for 18 on third down. But Oklahoma State was 4 for 15 on third, had a couple turnovers. And the yardage difference, 456 for Utah, 285 for Oklahoma State. They have the ball for less than half as far as time of possession compared to Utah, who nearly doubled up on them. Mika Bernard had 25 carries for 182 yards for the Utah Utes. and just ran them down. So Oklahoma State in trouble. Utah stays undefeated here. It's still looking good. Cam Rising, though. Man, can we get him on the field, please? Speaking of disappointments, BYU with its explosive plays, one of the best teams in the country as far as hitting the big number. They hosted a also undefeated at the time Kansas State, who's ranked 13th. And boy, did this look topsy-turvy. 38-9 was the final. The BYU Cougars absolutely beat the life out of the Kansas State Wildcats. And just, man, I mean, I don't know that they're necessarily in the Big 12 race, but Kansas State might be out of it. Avery Johnson, 15 for 28, 130, 2 picks. He did get a nice 30-yard run on the ground, finished with 74 yards credited after sack yardage on the ground there as well. But moving the football through the air was not happening. Jake Redsloff, 15 for 21, 149, and 2 touchdowns through the air for BYU. And they just really ripped apart Kansas State. 3 turnovers to none was the big difference there. So the defense really stepped up, forcing Kansas State to make some plays. Didn't happen. 8 penalties to 2 for Kansas State. Too many there. BYU only faced 9 third downs. They were 3 for 9, but they didn't face a whole lot of them. Kansas State was 8 for 17, so they were still pretty productive there, but they couldn't finish, and they can't have that happen. Tough road environment there for Kansas State. If you replay this on a neutral, this would be a lot closer game, but perhaps Kansas State is just not what we thought they were. James Madison, UNC, played a basketball game. 70-50 was the final. And it's not improbable that Mac Brown's career there is just about done. They've had a number of players they've sent to the NFL, especially at the quarterback position, where a lot of bones are made. But you can't give up 70 points at home to James Madison. 53 points at halftime. 53-21 at the half. That is insane. This is just, it's unbelievable. Every year they're in a battle like this. They schedule easier non-conference opponents, and it's a struggle. It's Appalachian State last year, 2 years ago, they were in multiple overtimes. And yes, they made the ACC Conference Championship game with Drake May, and they were promptly beat to death by Clemson. So not a whole lot to show for Mac Brown's time there, other than putting some guys in the NFL and having no results on the field. It's terribly unfortunate. Florida State wins at home, 14-9 over Cal. First win for Florida State, first loss for Cal. Colorado plays a very interesting game against Baylor. It comes down to a Hail Mary. I'm watching it, having it on one of my TVs, talking to, I believe, my brother in another state. Get off the phone with him. Hail Mary happens. I have to text my brother, hey, you got Colorado State on? Looks like they just fell short on the Hail Mary. Oh, man. Well, they get one more play out of it. This time it hits. They get the big play. Touchdown, last play of the game. We go to overtime. Colorado scores. Baylor's got to come in for a touchdown. Travis Hunter, boom, head on the ball. Knocks it through the end zone. Fumble, gone. Boom, ball to Colorado. And that's it. They win. Amazing finale from the last couple minutes through overtime. If you have a chance to check that out on DVR, highlight clips, whatever. And Colorado lucky to be 3-1. It was their first home game this year, I believe. Spectacular for them. They rushed the field. I believe it was the only crowd rush of the weekend. I don't want to say embarrassing. It's great to see a program rebuilding, but plenty of programs rebuild and they don't rush the field quite like that. Shadir Sanders still does some incredible things, getting out of the pocket sometimes to scramble, make some good throws. There's still some good receiving targets. Travis Hunter on any other team would be phenomenal. What if he kept his original commitment to Florida State? Not that he'd make a big impact on the team this year. I mean, I think he would, but last year's team, oh my goodness, they'd be in the playoffs for sure. His impact on both sides of the ball, you look at a lot of the big plays, he's making them. Doesn't miss very many snaps. Sher Sanders also makes some goofy plays too, taking too many snaps, holding the ball too long. Don't really like his show-off attitude. I don't know how that serves you well. Your plan is to go to the NFL. Your own teammates don't like that. I don't know how that kind of attitude serves you well in any purpose, especially when you're talking to down, essentially, to folks that will not be playing in the NFL or even guys that beat you. I just don't understand. Nevertheless, 3-1. I'm still turning them on because I think there's talent, at least a couple positions there. If they get beat, they get beat. But man, was last week's game incredibly exciting and very difficult for Baylor. That was trying to keep their head above water there. Texas, Ohio State, Ole Miss, Miami, Penn State, Ohio State roll against inferior teams. Arch Manning has a pretty good day. He doesn't throw for 1 billion yards and touchdowns, but he has a solid day against Louisiana. Miami looks great. Cam Ward should be one of the top quarterbacks for Heisman, along with Ole Miss's Jackson Dart. And they're trying to, it looks like, get him there with Lane Kiffin. So those two look like the top 2 quarterbacks right now in the country. So we have a trio of weekday games to kick us off. Thursday brings us not too exciting a game. Temple at 1-3 will be hosting Army, who's still undefeated, on ESPN. Be able to watch the Army men soldier on there. But Friday brings us Miami hosting Virginia Tech on ESPN at 7:30. The Canes heavy favorites here. Cam Ward's completing over 72% of his passes, 14-2 touchdown to interception ratio. He's only been sacked a couple times, but you have to keep in mind he's also been pulled from a couple games due to the blowouts. 11.7 yards per throw on 123 attempts. Second highest for a quarterback as far as depth of throw for guys with at least 100 pitches. Only behind Jackson Dart, who's averaging 13.1 on 119 attempts. He's technically, I believe, 5th in the country, but, there's a couple guys in there that have way fewer than 100 attempts. So to have that volume and be throwing that far downfield, they're creating some really, really big plays. And they're just a dominant team right now. Of course, smashed South Florida last week. And Jackson Dart, of course, Lane Kiffin looks like he's pushing for him to win Heisman. Virginia Tech struggling, 2-2 now, despite the fact they returned all but 1 or 2 starters. It's just a struggling squad. Miami, 3 touchdown favorites just about in this one. We'll see if they can keep rolling with another big win here. 8 o'clock on Fox. We'll have 3-0 Rutgers, who actually beat Virginia Tech last week. They'll be hosting a 3-1 Washington squad. And this game is 2.5 Rutgers way. The offensive line for the Scarlet Knights has been phenomenal. 1 sack given up this season so far. A top rushing offense with Kyle Monagai and Samuel Brown V. They have the former Minnesota quarterback there, Athan Kilikamanis, who's somewhat acceptable but not awesome. 6-1 touchdown to interception ratio, completing about 62% of his passes. Now they have wins over Howard, Akron, and Virginia Tech on the road last week, but this is still a squad that's looking like a pretty good, at least middling Big Ten team, right? And we have several of those right now, Washington being one of them. They have wins over Weber State, Eastern Michigan. Actually, Eastern Michigan's only lost so far. And Northwestern, they did lose the Apple Cup to Washington State. They're generating some pressure. Will Rogers is over 75% completion at 9.4 average yards down the field. No picks for him so far this season, so he's not the problem there. This could be a very interesting game, just to see what offensive game plan kind of rolls out here in a nice primetime slot for both of these Big Ten teams. Of course, Illinois, Nebraska, Indiana. Be interesting to sort out kind of the middle of this Big Ten and see which of these teams kind of rises to the upper layer of that middle crust. But just a good game here to isolate in the Friday night slot here. Fun to see. Heading into Saturday, we have a real noon slate. A dozen games at noon. Of course, this is an Eastern Standard Time. And it's a decent slate. I'm not sure that we have what I'd consider a true top watch. I have Slate Kansas State hosting Oklahoma State and Baylor hosting BYU, a couple of Big 12 games into this slate. But it's going to be really, I think, up to your discretion. But I put 2 games into the top watch category. They'll be front and focal for me. Kansas State currently ranked 23. Oklahoma State currently ranked 22nd. But this could be an eliminator game for them as far as the playoffs is concerned. For the loser of this one, Kansas State, Avery Johnson struggling to throw the ball last week. Oklahoma State struggling in its own right, benching their quarterback, Alan Bowman. Can't run the ball either. Struggling on defense. This team's really going down the pikes, really down the tubes here. And now they're going on the road to play Kansas State, hoping to bounce back after the BYU thumping. So just a struggle for both teams here. And we'll see. I don't really know what to expect. I think Kansas State is performing better on defense, but the wheels could come off for Oklahoma State. Just not really sure here. The favorite is KSU by 5 with a 54.5 point over-under in this one. Now, Baylor is now 2-2. BYU is 4-0. Baylor is favored at home, though, in this matchup. Don't tell me why. BYU is not exactly struggling, but not exactly converting effectively on third downs. Not that they always face a ton of them while hitting bigger plays down the field. Less than 30% conversion rate on third down. Again, they do rely on big plays to score. They are putting up about 33 points a game, just a touch under, and holding opponents to less than 13 points per game, while Baylor is doing something similar on defense as well. They're putting up almost 30 points a game, holding opponents to less than 17%, converting almost 43% on third down, and holding opponents to less than 32% conversion rate. And they've been pretty effective on the offensive side of the ball as well. Point being, both of these games should be pretty interesting. And although they may not exactly map out where the Big 12 is going, it could be an eliminator game for the Oklahoma State-Kansas State game. And BYU might have an opportunity to move to 5-0 on the road, unless Baylor, who let a game escape against Colorado last week, is able to play spoiler against BYU and make a homestand here. Moving into the channel flippers. And again, we have a plethora of options on Saturday in the noon window. Number 6, Ole Miss, according to the AP poll, will be hosting Kentucky. Now, the Wildcats, man, they've been on the struggle bus. They've beaten Ohio and USM, of course, but they've lost to South Carolina and Georgia, but only a point to Georgia, while they were hammered by South Carolina. A bit of a confusing team, but not a great team. Could do something with the defensive front there, pushing other squads around. The defense overall seems pretty good. The offense seems pretty putrid. They're already 0-2 in SEC play, and this is Ole Miss's opener here. They're not favored as heavily as you may think, 17.5. But of course, as stated previously, and if you watch any of these games, Ole Miss is trying to run up the score on anybody that they come across, with Jackson Dart putting up big numbers here. So look for him to continue to do that on ABC at noon. But will they run into a bit of opposition here with the Kentucky Wildcats? We shall see. Michigan will be hosting Minnesota. That'll be the big noon Fox game. This is under 10 points on the spread right now. As the Wolverines, we'll see if they try to pass the ball, I guess. You don't really see that happening in the near future. But if they actually hope to do anything progressive this year, then That seems like it would need to happen at some point. 35.5 point over-under in this game. Kind of gross. Maryland will be on the Big Ten Network. They'll be traveling on the road to take on Indiana, who's undefeated. 3-1 Terrapins, 4-0 Hoosiers, and the Hoosiers are favored by touchdown at home here. This will be an interesting battle to see if they can continue to stay undefeated as well. Both teams have already played a game in Big Ten play. Maryland can't really afford to take another loss. Villanova, Virginia, Connecticut are the wins on the schedule. They did take an L to Michigan State already, while the Indiana Hoosiers, of course, have beaten not a great schedule here. Charlotte, UCLA, WIU, Western Illinois, and Florida Atlantic, but have put up 31, 77, 42, and 52 points. And this would be a great win if they could bag it here to move to 5-0. Staying in the Big Ten, Purdue will be hosting Nebraska on Peacock. The Huskers favored by 10 on the road, hoping to bounce back after the Illinois upset. Purdue has already taken a bye week. They were slaughtered by Notre Dame earlier, 66-7, and of course on the road to Oregon State when they flew cross country, 38-21. There seems to be some optimism around this Purdue squad. I'm not really seeing it. Hudson Card's still piloting that squad there if you haven't got eyes on them yet. I haven't watched a whole lot of Purdue football myself, but Nebraska and Purdue there squirreled away on Peacock. We also have Boston College hosting Western Kentucky on the ACC network. A couple of 3-1 squads. Boston College favored by 13. They came back against Michigan State last week. A big touchdown play, a big strike at the end of that one to get them on the board. Michigan State nearly drove the field and had a comeback of their own. A big interception in the end zone sealed it up for Boston College in a rainy game last week. Western Kentucky was able to grab a win over a good MAC squad in Toledo. Of course, we can say that about a few MAC teams at the moment. So, again, that conference will be interesting to sort out. They were blanked by Alabama in the opener and pulled out wins over Eastern Kentucky and Middle Tennessee. This, again, looks like a team that's going to roll up points as they typically do. The quarterback, Caden Valkamp, he's completing almost 74% of his passes, 6-2 touchdown to interception ratio. He's been staying pretty clean in the pocket. They're not a great running team, and the defense seems to be moderate, I guess. So, again, less than a 2-touchdown favorite is Boston College at home. This should be an interesting little matchup to keep an eye on the side screen. Other notable games here, we do have Purdue and Nebraska should be bumped down to notable. Michigan and Minnesota as well, really depending on how some of these games work through. But NC State is hosting Northern Illinois. NC State has been real gross. I'm not sure if Grayson McCall is going to be back for this game after missing the last game and a half. I'm not sure that it matters. NC State has not looked real great on either side of the ball when it matters. Northern Illinois will be trying to bounce back from Buffalo. The Buffalo loss last time out, but again, has looked like a pretty efficient team, all things considered. And they are not favored, of course, in this one, but the line is less than a touchdown at the moment. I'm looking at this. This will be one of these weird games on the CW network, but it is notable. It's something you can keep an eye on the box score, possibly flip over to if it gets interesting. Tulane will be hosting South Florida. I think this is kind of interesting. Both these teams are sitting at 2-2. Last time out, we saw South Florida get, of course, absolutely wrecked by Alabama. By Miami. Of course, they were wrecked by Alabama as well. This is not an awful football team, but they are very much a middling to lower mid-tier team. Byron Brown at quarterback, 2 touchdowns, 0 picks on the season. He's the leading rusher for the squad as well. The defense leaves a little bit to be desired, but this looks like a team that could, I don't want to say compete for the American, but keep things interesting. Tulane as well, just not sure about them yet. They struggled against Louisiana last week. Now, Louisiana themselves has, of course, General Booty there from transfer over from Oklahoma, so a former top prospect, at least the quarterback position, who can operate an offense. And just a 8-point win on the road last week against that squad, a team you'd hope they'd be able to beat a little bit more soundly if they truly were going to compete in the American Conference. Touchdown loss to Kansas State, 5-point loss to Oklahoma, and a win against a much lower level team there in the opener. But maybe they'll be able to compete here for the American. Again, it's not as dominant a conference. Memphis is going to be in the hunt there. North Texas has defensive problems. Maybe Navy will still be in the hunt there. They're undefeated right now, as is Army. UTSA is looking a little iffy, a little gamey there. So these two teams could be in the mix still. So just keep that in mind. Tulane hosting South Florida, noon, ESPNU. And finally, UNLV hosting that Navy team. That'll be on as well. Midshipmen trying to win on the road to stay undefeated and move to 4-0 against a 1-2 UAB squad. This will be on ESPN2. Midshipmen favored by 3.5. Now, moving on to the afternoon slate. 20 games, which is a little bit down from what we're used to. We usually have a few more games than that. Now, again, I have the top watch as the 3:30 Louisville at Notre Dame, but there may be some more interesting games that kind of crop up. The Notre Dame Irish clearly have issues, as was very clear from anyone that watched Riley Leonard really at Duke there. He has not looked good as a passer there at Notre Dame. Ground game is fine. We play a little defense. We can get the ball to tight end sometimes. But there's clearly problems with Notre Dame, not only from the Northern Illinois loss, but they've looked spotty at times as well. And that passing game, the forward pass just isn't a real big part of their offense right now. They're 6.5-point favorites at home. They are ranked 16th right now. Louisville's 15th for what the AP poll rankings are really worth. Unfortunately, this is on Peacock, which is such a pain in the ass to get sometimes. But this might be the top game in the afternoon. Louisville had its first contest for real last week against Georgia Tech, a 31-19 win there. Did require a special teams touchdown in order to put that margin, that space between them and the Yellow Jackets, a 12-point win. But they still look like a pretty good ball club. Tyler Shaw is there at the quarterback position. He's had so many injuries in his career. Started way back in Oregon, transferred over to Texas Tech. I don't think he's played more than 8-9 games in a season, and he's played plenty of games, plenty of 4 or 5 game seasons. He's been around a while. He's completing 68% of his passes, 11.2 yard average downfield, 8 touchdowns, no turnovers, been pretty efficient. They seem to have a pretty good fleet of running backs in Isaac Brown, Duke Watson, Kaijun Brown, I believe it's pronounced as well. They divided up between really 5 different guys at the position. And they have a good lead receiver, Ja'Cory Brooks, who has 17 catches already on the season, averaging 17.5 yards per grab. So, again, they played nobody in the first couple weeks of the season. Austin Peay, Jacksonville State, took a bye week, came back, beat Georgia Tech, and now have to go on the road to beat Notre Dame. And I think they'll do it. They have an opportunity. They'll get some revenge from the thumping to Notre Dame last time out. But this will be a good ball game on the Peacock Network at 3:30. Some of your channel flipper candidates, though. USC rebounding from really a flat offensive performance against Michigan. They'll be hosting Wisconsin, who presumably will try to run a similar template of pounding the ball. But man, they have just not looked that great in Luke Fickell's tenure so far. They were beat by Alabama 42-10 last week. I believe they couldn't even cover the spread in that game. Wins over Western Michigan and South Dakota earlier this season really didn't look very impressive in either of those games. It's really unfortunate. Tyler Van Dyke has been banged up. Braid Locke played some quarterback there. I'm not sure it matters which one will be taking snaps in this game. The offense just hasn't looked very, very potent regardless. They are converting just over 45% on third down, which is good to sustain drives, of course, but just not been a super effective offense. So we'll see what they can do against USC. I presume this could be a closer game if they're able to get their way, but right now it's a 15.5-point line the Trojans' way. Auburn will be hosting Oklahoma. The Sooners hang on to a top 25 spot at number 21. This game will be on ABC. Auburn's just falling apart. Hugh Freeze has taken all kinds of heat. Presumably, we will get Peyton Thorne here at quarterback for Auburn. He's still the better thrower, but we may see some quarterback switcheroos here. Just another team that's struggling offensively, and as it turns out, the defense isn't super great either. Oklahoma obviously could be playing musical quarterbacks as well, and the defense looks very good. 45.5-point over-under almost seems too high. Oklahoma's favored by 2 points on the road. This could possibly turn into an ugly game as well. 3:30 as well. Texas A&M, ranked 24th right now, also playing a different quarterback, Marcel Reed. He is second in rushing yardage for the team. He's been a decent passer while he's been in there. Looks pretty good. Looks pretty good. They'll be hosting the Arkansas Razorbacks. This is on ESPN. A&M favored by 4 points at the moment. Taylon Green, former Boise State quarterback, transferring into Arkansas. Not a very good passer, it's shown, but he's looked pretty good running the football, moving around back there for the Razorbacks. They beat Auburn on the road 24-14 last week, have wins over UAB. They put up 70 in their opener over Pine Bluff. They lost to Oklahoma State 38-31 on the road, which doesn't look so great anymore, does it? But Taylon Green, 53% completion percentage, 4 touchdowns, 4 picks. But he's doing a good job on the ground. He's got 4 touchdowns on the ground. Jaquinton Jackson has 472 yards on 69 carries, 6.8 yards per tote there, and 8 touchdowns as well. And the team defensively is looking much better than the punching bag it was just a year or two ago. They're also converting 61% on third down and able to keep the ball moving. So watch out for Arkansas there. Texas A&M, man, even with Mike Delco there, I had high hopes for them. We'll see. But a couple 3-1 teams in the SEC that aren't being talked about, mostly for good reasons. They have to prove it. And this could be a good game because one of them is going to be 4-1 coming out. Your other notable games, Kansas trying to rebound here. They'll be hosting TCU. The Jayhawks are 1-3. TCU is 2-2. This will be squirreled away on ESPN Plus, basically a coin flip game. UCF will be hosting Colorado on Fox. The Knights are 3-0. Colorado is 3-1. And Central Florida is favored by 14.5 at home. Always an interesting football team here. UCF, if you recall, has the transfer from Arkansas quarterback KJ Jefferson. He just floated over there. He's been pretty productive, 5-1 touchdown to interception ratio, just under 63% completion percentage, 11 yards per toss. He's doing some work on the ground, not nearly as much as he did at Arkansas. They have a couple of good running backs there and have the ground game really moving. RJ Harvey's been very good, 8 touchdowns in 3 games. They've already taken a bye week. They had a 1-point win over TCU as their best win right now, so it's not super great. They are converting 57% on third down, able to keep the ball moving. They've scored in the red zone 12 of 15 attempts. That's just score, doesn't include turnovers. That's field goals and touchdowns. So they seem to be a team that can really kind of get things going. They're just a weird team that always has some of these outliers where, they may give up a boatload of yards in the secondary and be a stout defense on third down. I don't know. They always have something weird going on with them. They seem to be really efficient running the football. Throwing the ball has never been a strength for KJ Jefferson. The defense only has 1 sack. They're giving up a 40% third down conversion, which is perhaps a little higher than you'd like for a really elite team. Not that they're necessarily elite, but they have an opportunity to move to 4-0 with a nice win over Colorado. Just an interesting game, especially with Colorado involved, to flip over. Maybe a game that I watch as much as any other here in the afternoon slate. I think that'll be making my 4 box, almost certainly. Finally, I have UNLV hosting Fresno State. Of course, UNLV down a quarterback, down a running back, as they're sitting out due to NIL issues, not getting what they were guaranteed or stated. Seems like they may not have some of that in writing, but one guy's transferring, one guy sitting out due to NIL, maybe transferring in the future. Terribly unfortunate, but they have to save the rest of their games to tally the rest of this year as a redshirt to make more money when they can. Certainly understandable. They've already beaten Kansas last week, wins over UTU and Houston, and it's just terribly unfortunate for that to happen. It sounds like there's not a big drop-off in quality from one quarterback to another. One's a better runner, one's a better thrower, and we will lose some depth at running back. But other than that, UNLV still favorite right now as far as I can tell. Fresno State's 3-1. They're already 1-0 in the Mountain West. They lost to Michigan, of course, in a closer game than the score indicated, 30-10 in the opener. They beat New Mexico last week, 38-21, leaving the Lobos winless still. They thumped New Mexico State, beat Sacramento State. Seems to still be an okay team, but maybe not one that can really compete for the Mountain West, which perhaps is why UNLV is still favored in this football game. Might be better, at least defensively, maybe on both sides of the football, than Fresno. So we'll find out about that. I will have eyes on it 3:30 FS1. Other notable games to jaunt through. George Mason is 3-0, looking to move to 4-0, even though they had a coaching change and a turnover there. Still a lot of skill, still a lot of talent. They're on at 1:30. They'll be hosting Ball State. Fully expected to win and continue on there. 3 touchdown favorites. ESPN Plus is where that game will be on. Sam Houston and Texas State will be engaging on ESPN Plus at 3 o'clock. Texas State favored by 8 on the road here. Sam Houston, one of these teams that, of course, bumped up from the lower level here, making their, not debut, but second year. They lost to Arizona State, then took a bye. Still a very talented roster. Jordan McLeod, of course, transferring from a former Power 5 program to Texas State. He's been fairly effective, it seems like, here with the Bobcats. And Sam Houston State, not super impressive schedule. They lost to UCF, beat Rice, Hawaii, New Mexico State last week. Their quarterback, Hunter Watson, has not been very impressive, but this team still built up to a 3-1 record so far. We'll see if they can pull an upset at home on Saturday. Appalachian State will be hosting Liberty, who is still not looking like a super impressive team. Again, no one's really watching them. This game is on ESPN Plus. They're 3.5-point favorites on the road as we continue to watch these point spreads. They won 35-24 over ECU last week. So they did manage to pull it out against the Pirates. 4 touchdown passes for Caden Salter last week as they managed to put up the yards there. 414 to 331 over the Pirates. They converted 13 of 17 third downs. Pretty crazy there. They survived their own couple turnovers and 9 penalties in that one as well. Just not an elite unit like they were previously. Just having some problems there, I think. Wake Forest will be hosting Louisiana at 3:30 as well. Wake Forest still managing to hang in there. I mean, they're 1-2. Louisiana's 2-1. It's on the ACC network. Just mentioning it. Wake Forest is about a field goal favorite at this point. Kent State's not good. They're hosting Eastern Michigan, who's 3-1. Will have a chance to move to 4-1 at 3:30 on ESPN+, and they are heavy favorites against the not-so-golden Flashes. Their only loss was to Washington, 30-9. UMass, Jacksonville State, and SFPA, what's that, San Francisco, Pennsylvania, lower-level win there for Eastern Michigan. They aren't exactly the most impressive bunch, but 4-1, man. It's not often they make a bowl game, so got to fight for that when you can. I do have the 4 o'clock ESPN2 game on here, a rivalry with two teams that are combined 7-1, Duke hosting North Carolina. And boy, has this lost its luster, right? Duke, did you still know Duke was undefeated? Less than a field goal favorite here. In this one, they're just not very impressive. They're kind of boring to watch. They beat Middle Tennessee last week. Finally beat a team by a solid margin. Of course, they struggled to beat Elon in the opener, right? Struggled to beat Connecticut. Struggled to beat Northwestern. Malik Murphy, the former bench warmer at Texas, but also a former either 4 or 5-star recruit. Over 1,000 yards passing already, 11 touchdowns, 4 picks. The ground game is led by Star Thompson. That is his name. 314 yards, 4.6 yards average there. But this team has just not been super fun to watch. Now, Duke is one of the leaders in the country in sacks. 15 sacks. 3 interceptions. Forced a handful of fumbles. Like, the defense has been doing damage. And North Carolina, of course, gave up 70 points to James Madison. I have no idea what this game is going to be. Duke could win 50-0. It could be 50-50, 52-50. Like, I don't even know what to expect from this game. 55.5 is where the over-under sits. Perhaps this should be in the channel flippers. I have it in the notables because there are several other more interesting games. I'm not sure if this will make my 8-box, quite frankly, on my 2 televisions. 4:15 finally, Texas will be hosting Mississippi State. And boy, how far Mississippi State has fallen. They're 1-3, of course. Just terribly unfortunate situation there. This is on the SEC network. It's really too bad. They lost to Florida pretty badly last week. Were blown up by Toledo. Lost by touchdown to Arizona State. There could be a case that this is the worst team in the Power 4. Blake Shapen, the quarterback there who transferred over from Baylor, is not the reason. 8 touchdowns, a pick, almost 69% completion percentage. He's been sacked about a dozen times. The ground game isn't very good. The defense isn't very good. Just not a very good football team. It's just terribly too bad. Not sure if Quentin Ewers is coming back this week, but, why bother if you have Arch Manning back there? So that is a 38.5 point spread in an SEC conference game between two teams that are not Vanderbilt. That's awful status to be in. Moving to the evening games that start 5 o'clock or later Eastern time. This is your big one of the day. There's no question about it. The game you want to be watching, if you have a choice, you got other things to do. Most adults, most of us do. And that is, of course, the Alabama-Georgia game. We usually only get to watch these two teams battle in the SEC championship, and if we're lucky, you get in the playoffs. But as it so happens, heck, we could get them playing 3 times this season. So it's number 4 Alabama hosting number 2 Georgia, 7:30 prime time. This is on ABC. Georgia's favored by 2 on the road, 48.5 point over under. And I don't know if they should be. They've had a week off to prepare for this. Alabama shredded Wisconsin last week. They took a bye previous to that. But again, Georgia's had 2 weeks to prepare for this game. Although there's been changes at Alabama, notably, right? Jaden Milroe has been performing quite well. He's completing 67% of his passes, 11.3 average, 8 touchdowns, 0 turnovers, sacked a handful of times. He's also the third in rushing yards. Jam Miller's the leader, 29 carries, 265 yards. That's over 9 yards per carry and 3 touchdowns. But Milrose, 6 touchdowns as a running back and over 4 yards per, making him very effective and very dangerous, of course, in the red zone. And a very dangerous weapon you have to spy and keep an eye on in the red zone. They're averaging over 49 points per game. They're converting 52.5% on third down. Of course, none of this is shocking. You can read off all the offensive and defensive numbers you want for Alabama and Georgia, and you go, wow, that's impressive. But how are they going to do when battling another possible national championship contender in each other? Now, I think the week off certainly helps Georgia, but a home night game in Tuscaloosa is certainly beneficial as well. So this could be a coin flipper. Now, both of these teams actually struggled last year with real big playmaking wide receivers and really damaging running backs, as it turns out. And it seems like there are few more difference makers this year for both of these teams. Jam Miller's just stated, the running back for Alabama, seems to be a great weapon for them. Ryan Williams leads the team, the Tide, with 10 catches, 285 yards, 4 touchdowns. They seem to have some weapons there. He's a freshman. Georgia, on the other hand, brought in Trevor Etienne at running back to be a difference maker. He's already missed a game, but he's averaging 6.5 yards per carry and is the team's leading rusher and carry taker, I guess, even if he hasn't scored. And they have a couple of playmakers. Dominic Lavelle is back, 12 catches for 155 yards. Adrian Smith has looked good with 11 grabs for 142. But this team still needs to justify what happened at Kentucky, basically. You're going on the road against Alabama now. So Carson Beck, we don't expect to have as bad of a game as he did there. He still hasn't turned the ball over. He's completing almost 68% of his passes. Expect him to be a lot craftier. The defense is still pretty good, but doesn't seem to have a lot of depth. That's one of the main issues. And Alabama kind of looks like the better team. But we will find out on this big game. 7:30 ABC. Big one. This is where everyone's going, I would assume. ESPN, Fox, Barstool, whoever has the ability to for broadcasting, I imagine, will be at this game. I don't think there is a second place up this upcoming week. This is where you're going to be. Alabama, Georgia. And I'm very excited for it. This is appointment viewing. It seems like Jalen Milroe possibly snuck back into or I guess for the first time this year, snuck into the Heisman conversation. Although Cam Moore, Jackson Dart should be at the top there. But he could certainly break his way towards that upper level. Carson Beck could really use a signature game. And this is going to be big for Georgia. Because for any folks that have listened to any preseason material, as you know now, Georgia plays Alabama, Texas, and Ole Miss on the road. Now they do get Tennessee at home. They get like Auburn, Florida, Georgia Tech at home, those kind of things. But 3 big road games against 3 of the most difficult teams in the conference sets up for a very, very difficult slate for Georgia, even if they are spaced out a bit. Alabama, on the other hand, they have Tennessee on the road, and they have LSU on the road. They have Vanderbilt on the road. That's very different than what Georgia's got. Still some challenges in there. They got Oklahoma on the road as well. But we see that looks less challenging. Mizzou at home. That looks less challenging. They win here, they're in a good spot to make the playoffs. Because even if they have a trip up in the next few games, Tennessee looking most glaring on the road, they're in a good spot. Georgia, dangerous. They could easily be a 2-loss team that makes it in, should there be one. But, man, that's a tough slate. at Texas, at Ole Miss. Still home against Tennessee. That's going to be a tough sledding, and that Kentucky game is very glaring. The near loss, I should say, and how close that could have been. Now we have two pretty clear channel flippers to me in this evening slate, which is a little lighter as well at 18 total games. We have a 7 o'clock game with Michigan State hosting Ohio State, who's currently ranked 3rd. Michigan State, there seems to be some belief that Michigan State can kind of hang in here. The Childs is a little bit erratic. It can perhaps keep Michigan State involved here. Ohio State's been a little bit slow to get off at the beginning of these games. The defense has had some questions at times, and it's kind of hard for me to believe that Michigan State's really going to challenge here. Ohio State's 24-point favorites on the road. This game's going to be on Peacock. 48.5-point over-under, but it's worth checking out to see if the Spartans can hang in there for a bit. And the other big game is Penn State hosting Illinois at 7:30, currently ranked 9 and 19th respectively. This is the big NBC game. Illinois 4-0 and Penn State 3-0 coming off a bye. They're almost 20-point favorites in this game with a 47.5-point over-under. I very much think Illinois has a shot in this game. The offense coming alive a little bit last week against Nebraska, looking pretty productive. And they've beaten two teams in Illinois and Nebraska already that are fairly decent competition. 71% completion percentage for Luke Altmaier at this point. 10 touchdowns, no interceptions. He's looking a lot better this season. Penn State is hitting much bigger chunk plays down the field, more explosive plays. Drew Allers completing 70% of his passes, 12.6 yards per attempt. That is significant and significantly better than last season. Some of the best deep throws statistics in the country. Nicholas Singleton has emerged as the lead back just ahead of Ketron Allen. He's performing at a much higher level at this particular point, although it's still a great duo there. Tyler Warren, the tight end, number 1 receiving target, has been very effective. Just looking like a good ball club, of course. And I don't know that it's a whiteout at this point, but that'll be a very good ball game to see if Illinois can hang around there. I think they can be a little surprising and at least stay within the spread there in an interesting Big Ten matchup. And a few more notable games to round out your lineup. Clemson will be hosting Stanford on ESPN. They are heavy favorites, 3+ touchdowns and points expected in this one as well. So we'll see if Stanford can hang around on the road there. Houston's favorite at home at 7 o'clock against number 18 Iowa State. Houston does not look so good so far. They are 2-touchdown underdogs at home on FS1. This is a game that Iowa State needs to get here. Houston does not look so good this year, but we'll see what Iowa State can do on the road. They need to really win these easier games, I should say, before they can continue on and pick up some bigger wins if they really want to compete in the Big 12. Memphis is looking to bounce back. 7:30, they're hosting at Middle Tennessee on ESPNU. Should be a game they can pick up. Nearly 4 touchdown favorites in this one. Number 14, LSU is hosting South Alabama on the SEC Network at 7:45. You know how feisty South Alabama, some of these Sun Belt teams can be. And the Cougars are certainly one of them. Is it Cougars? Jaguars. That's what it is. One of those big cats. They're 3+ touchdown favorites, 65.5-point over-unders. We know the defense struggles. That could be an interesting game to keep an eye on. SMU will be hosting Florida State at 8 o'clock on the ACC Network. Odd to see a 3-1 next to SMU and a 1-3 record next to Florida State, isn't it? Actually, the first ACC conference game for SMU and the 4th game for Florida State. And SMU's favored by nearly touchdown in this one. Still not sure what to make of Florida State. Interesting to see what happens here. And Texas Tech finally hosting Cincinnati at 8 o'clock. I'm kind of interested to see if Cincinnati can win on the road here. I don't think Texas Tech is very good, even though they're 3-1. Cincinnati might have something going for them. This is on ESPN2. Texas Tech is favored by a field goal. Cincinnati might be able to pull an upset here, though. They have a shutout win over Houston last week, wins over Miami of Ohio, Townsend, and a loss to Pittsburgh, who again is undefeated and looks pretty good. Brandon Sorsby is a pretty decent quarterback for Cincinnati. Over 1,000 yards already, 65% completion percentage, 8 touchdowns, no turnovers. They can run the ball a bit with Corey Kittner. And I think the defense is okay. They've got 10 sacks so far this season, though they played some lesser competition, certainly. Averaging some good offensive statistics so far this season. 31 points isn't particularly impressive, but 45% third down conversion. And just looks like a team that might be a little bit surprising. So we'll see. A couple 3-1 teams, but Cincinnati, if they can go on the road here, might be a cut above. And finally, your late night slate. 3 games on the books here. We have Washington State on the road at number 25, Boise State right now on FS1 at 10 o'clock. Boise State about a 7.5-point favorite right now. Looking to bounce back. They're 2-1 at this moment. Looking to pad the stats for their superstar running back. They ran it up on Portland State a couple weeks ago, and now Ashton Gentry is back to it again. 586 yards rushing, 10.5 average on 56 carries, 9 touchdowns. Number of leading statistics nationally. He's a dark horse for the Heisman. Big opportunity here to make a homestand against a surprising 4-0 Washington State team who has wins over Texas Tech, Washington, San Jose State. Not anything spectacular, but could be worse wins. John Mader has over 1,100 yards of offense, completing 54% of his passes, 11 touchdowns to 4 picks. I think they're gettable. Could be an interesting game here in the 10 o'clock window. Then we have Utah, ranked 10th, hosting Arizona, 10:15 on ESPN. This will be a good one. Cam Rising, I think, is expected back for this one. Utah's 11-point favorites. Arizona took a week off. McMillan will be back at it with Noah Fifta, hoping for a dozen or so targets, some big plays. That's the key connection there. Defense has been a little iffy at times, so we'll see if they can do some damage. Under 50 points expected in this ball game. And at 11 o'clock, UCLA has looked pretty miserable. They're 1-2. They're hosting number 8 Oregon, who's 3-0 on Fox. Oregon nearly 4-score favorites on the road here, and will be looking to stay undefeated as these two former Pac-12 teams meet in a Big Ten showdown. So we got a couple options here. We got some ranked teams going late in the late night window, and we'll have some fun stuff to do in the late evening to check out these teams. All right, your top watch is an obvious one. We have Alabama and Georgia, the big game on the slate. Audible, the top game, the top channel flipper for a weaker time slot is Arkansas at Texas A&M. I kind of think that'll be one of the more interesting, kind of middling SEC games to watch in that noon window. Your underrated game is Cincinnati at Texas Tech. Again, both teams 3-1. I kind of like Cincinnati a little bit better. Let's see if they can get a win on the road. If not, Texas Tech will all of a sudden be 4-1. That is in the evening slate, while you have eyes on Georgia and Alabama. Your small screen starlet, again, it's kind of slim pickings when we have all this conference realignment. Right now, I kind of like Georgia Southern at Georgia State. That kind of seems like a feisty game there in the afternoon. Fresno State at UNLV, I hope will still be a competitive game as well. But the top one for me, I think, is going to be South Florida at Tulane. That just seems like it's going to be a nice battle between a couple of 2-2 teams. It's under the radar, and a couple squads that can still cause some damage in the American, and that's, again, in that noon window where there'll be a lot of different action going on. You'll have a chance to get eyes on that. Upset watch, I have Illinois at Penn State. Penn State, of course, struggling against Bowling Green. Maybe Bowling Green is just a good team, but Illinois has looked surprisingly strong so far. Maybe they can pull an upset in a surprise game on the road there in the evening window as well. And finally, your late night snack, I have Utah hosting Arizona as the top game in that trio there. But Boise State at Washington State I think will be interesting as well. Oregon presumably will get its act together finally and beat up on UCLA on the road there. But again, we'll have an opportunity to get all three of these games on at the same time in that final frame. Thank you very much for tuning in. Enjoy the college ball. I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
All my blessings, 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 all my blessings.
I need my blessings every penny. Daily counting every single one, I'm seeing plenty. Level up and watch that beat turn into a